Hi, I'm T from Pilates Pro Maintenance. Today I'm here with Gratz and we're going to go over the side wheel maintenance for the Gratz reformer. We have already turned the reformer over. We have set up by covering the back end of the carriage. We will use this as our working station, and we basically want to cover every part that we're going to have tools on or wheels on. This service can get very messy very quickly. We will be removing all the side wheels. Each wheel has 2 washers, which you will keep track of. You'll keep them all together and uniform in the same place, in the same manner that I will teach you to stay organized and not lose any pieces. What you will need for the side wheel service is the white lithium grease, which we use for all the Gratz equipment. We use it to lubricate the axle screws and the wheels. You will need a number 4 Allen key. I have the entire set here, but you really only need number 4. I have some Q-tips. I have some pre-cut paper towels. And under me, I have a garbage bag, which I will use to dispose of all the Q-tips and pieces of paper towels that I will be using during the service. So let's go ahead and remove one of these wheels. When putting the Allen key into the Allen key screw of the side wheel, be sure to give yourself enough space so that you are not against the main wheel. What I will do is, if I have the entire set, I will place the rest of the set away from that wheel so I can have enough room to actually spin around. One thing to keep in mind when removing these wheels is that you will hear unlocking of the threaded screw. It's going to sound like a click, and it sounds like this. You will hear a click every time you unscrew that screw, and I will actually just tighten it right back up and loosen it again just so you can hear it again. Every single time you loosen that screw, you will hear a click. You did not break the screw, or there's nothing wrong with it, and it's going to make that unlocking sound every single time. If you've seen any of our other services, you'll know that we like to stay uniform with everything we do, meaning that if we are using the Allen keys now, we'll continue to use them until we don't need them anymore. So what I mean by that is, just loosen the wheels, leave them in the casters where they are. Don't remove them off the casters. Don't remove the screws just yet. Let's just go ahead and loosen all the wheels, and then we'll come back to removing this wheel. If you were servicing the side wheels to all the other reformers, then the same applies. You would just use the screw, the Allen key, to loosen all the screws at this time. You don't want to come back to pick the Allen key up after you've taken off one wheel and got grease all over your hands. Now it's all over the Allen keys, and it just gets messy very quick. So staying organized is a big part of the Pilates Pro service. Just loosen them enough so that you can take them off with your hands. You will hear the click for every single screw that you unscrew. Make sure the Allen key is nice in there first, and you'll hear the click. And the idea is that once you're done using the Allen key to loosen all the Allen key screws, you won't need the Allen key until you're putting them all back together, is the idea. Now let's go ahead and move one of these wheels. Let's remove this wheel right off. When removing the wheel off the caster, which is the black pad that the wheel is sitting on, remove the wheel entirely with the screw inside. Do not remove the screw out of the wheel. This will cause you to lose the washers more easily. There are 2 washers that sit right in between the screw and the wheel, and you will see them as I remove them. I'm taking off the axle screw, which is very similar to the main wheel's axle screw, threaded on one side, has a head on the other, except that it's a Allen key head. On the side of the wheel, you'll see the 2 washers. You have a flat metal thicker washer, and then you have a Gardner washer, which is a thinner one, and it's just curved into one direction. And we'll go over exactly which direction it should be placed when installing it back together. Let me just hold this up for 1 second. so you can see the Gardner washer. And I'll give it a wipe so you guys can actually see it. So that's the Gardner washer. And then the silver washer that I'm going to put next to it will be the other metallic washer. These are the two washers that come with the side wheel, along with the axle screw. These three parts in the wheel make up the side wheel. They both sit onto the caster, which is this black part that sits right on the frame of the carriage. Once you've removed one wheel, stay uniform, keep the washers next to the screws, keep all the washers next to each other. It's going to help you stay organized and not lose any of these small parts that can easily be lost by dropping them in between the casters into a carpeted floor, or depending on which area you're working on, may not be a studio, maybe a house, you can easily lose these small parts. It's good to stay uniform. I'm just going to go ahead and remove the rest of the wheels. I'm going to put all the screws next to each other, all the washers next to each other, and I'll show you the final product once I'm done removing everything off. Everything should be hand loosed by now. So you take off the entire wheel with the screw and just remove it right over a safe place where if they drop, you can at least see them and have a chance at keeping them organized. So I don't know if you can see here, but already there's hair that comes off that's tangled between the washer and the screw. And this is only the beginning of when you need service. This hair only accumulates more, the grease gets darker, the ride gets a lot more stickier, they would call it, or the carriage doesn't come in, which is a big problem that has to do with the side wheels. For the side wheel service, might be a little hard to use gloves while cleaning the Gardner washer because they're so thin and they're so tiny that the chances are they'll keep getting stuck to the glove. For that specific part, I would recommend maybe just cleaning the Gardner washers without gloves, and you can put gloves for the rest of the service. As you can see, we like to stay, again, organized, all the wheels together, washers together, screws together. If you were doing a full service on this reformer and you had the main wheels off at the same time that you have the side wheels off, you would need all the space you can get and all the organization you can get. That's why I like to keep them towards the edge of the mat and all together and all basically in the same little space. Because if I need space for either the Q-tips, the pre-cut towels, the tools I would usually have away. I'm keeping here for the sake of you guys seeing what I use, but I would keep the tools off this station because I need all the space I can get for all these little washers, for the chair, for the wheels to sit on, the nuts, and when you're doing 10 wheels per reformer, it turns into quite an extensive job to keep track of all these things if you don't have a system in place. Now that all the wheels have been taken off, we're going to go ahead and clean all the old grease of all the components, starting with the axle screw. I'm just going to go ahead and grab each and every piece of each side wheel and clean all the excess grease off. For the axle screw, I'm cleaning the threaded part, the shaft where the wheel actually rotates on, and the head as well. The head gets a lot of grease from the tool that we use. Once it's nice and clean, back to its shiny state, nice and smooth surface, you can move on to the next one. And I'm just gonna go ahead and clean all these screws. And again, guys, speaking about the system between the system, within the system, what I mean is if I'm cleaning screws, then I'm only cleaning the screws now. I won't switch from cleaning one of these screws to cleaning a washer to back to screws, or from cleaning the washers to cleaning a wheel to back to a washer or a screw. This decreases the chances of you forgetting to clean anything. If you switch from one part to the other, chances are you forget to clean one screw. You think you were done with the screws and you move on with your service. Comes to the end of the service, you realize you didn't clean that screw, or you didn't put grease, or you forgot a part of the service, and you'd have to go back and either grab tools you put away or open the grease that you already put away. And that's just going to save you a lot of thinking. All the screws are clean. I'm just going to go ahead and grab washers one by one and make sure I clean all the old darkened grease off them. We're now going to start cleaning the gardener washers, which are the really thin curved washers. And these are the ones that I suggested to not use gloves for. These do get pretty dirty, but they have a very specific function to keep that wheel quiet and from damaging the wheel against the axle screw. Once all the screws and the washers are clean, I'll go ahead and clean the sides of the wheels to clean all that excess grease that's on. If the side wheels haven't been serviced in a long time, you may notice hair, debris, and solidified grease on the exterior of the wheel. It may not just be as simple as a wipe down. You may have to kind of like put a little bit of an elbow grease into it, and worst case scenario, a little bit of the greaser on one of the paper towels and just really work it out of it. In this scenario where you haven't serviced the side wheels in, I would say, over 5 years, it starts solidifying pretty tough. Once you're done cleaning the exterior of the wheels, it's time to use the Q-tips to clean the inside of the wheels. These are serviced pretty often, but there's a chance that you may need more than 3 or 4 Q-tips per wheel to make sure that it comes out completely white at the end without any of the black grease. And this is basically as white as they come out when the Q-tip is clean. I mean, when the wheel is clean, you won't have any of the dark stuff come out at all from the Q-tip. Okay. Once all the wheels are clean and the washers are cleaned, as well as the axle screws, you're just gonna grab an extra piece of paper towels and just dry off any grease that's on the actual casters where the side wheels lay on. There's a lot of grease that just builds up right on the exteriors of the casters. Sometimes it builds up and solidifies as well. Just want to make sure you have all that grease completely off. And this is how much grease basically builds up on the casters. Also turns black, and eventually it solidifies, and it makes the ride a little bumpier as well. Now that all the components are clean, the wheels are clean, we've cleaned the washers, the casters, and the screws, it is time to put the white lithium grease back onto the axle screws and put the wheels back onto the casters. Putting the wheels back is very specific for the side wheels. First, you want to add the washers back onto the screws before adding the wheels back on and before putting grease back onto the screws. The reason we put the washers before the grease is because if you add grease to the shaft of the screw, then put the washer in, the washer will remove all of the grease off the screw as it slides up and down. So you want to have the washers in there already before you add grease, otherwise you'll be doing it twice. Another very specific part of this part of the service is the way the gardener washer goes on to the screw. It is very specific which way the curve goes on. And if we were looking at the gardener, I don't know if you can get a good look at it, but this is the way it would face on the screw. We would basically have the two wings of the gardener facing up towards the head of the screw. You're going to put the gardener into the screw in the same direction with both wings facing up. Some people call it the cowboy hat as they put it in, others call it a happy face. But basically, you want a happy face when you're putting the gardener into the screw. It'll be facing this way. And that's the first washer you're putting onto the screw. Next, you're putting on the metal washer that sits right on top of the wheel. And once those two washers are in, you're ready to put grease. But like I said, we stay uniform, so let's just put all the washers back on all the screws, and then we could just grab that grease tube and do the grease part. The cowboy hat facing up, smiley face facing up towards the head of the screw. Then the second washer, shiny side up, shiny side towards the washer. You will have a flatter side that goes towards the thread of the screw. Once all the washers are on the axle screws, you can grab your white lithium grease. And if you're doing things in an orderly fashion, this is the only time that you are using the grease. If you have taken off all the other wheels to the reformer, this is when you would add grease to the rest of them, assuming you clean them all at the same time. And if you have other reformers you're working on, this is the time where you add grease to all those wheels or washers if you're doing the main wheels. Hold the screw upside down so that gravity holds the washers in place. If you put it thread side down, the washers will just fall back out. So you just want the head down of the screw. And with the head down and the washers in place, we could actually just add grease to the whole shaft of the screw. We want to add this grease in a very flat manner, in a way that won't slide out when you're putting the wheel back, when you're putting the screw back into the wheel. And I'm using the nozzle of the grease tube itself to help spread the grease along the shaft. And I always have the screw either upside down or on its side, just to keep the washers from falling out. Once the washers are in, the screw is very safe to just put down. The washers will actually keep it off the paper towel or towel that you're using to protect your working station. Now that we have added lithium grease to all the screws and the axle screws, we're going to put 2 dots of white lithium grease just on the caster. And I'll show you on this caster here quickly what I mean. And we just want to put those 2 dots to lubricate some of the wheel friction between the caster. We just don't want it to be rubber on metal. That'll help the length of the wheel, the lifetime of the wheel. We're just putting 2 little dots on all casters where the wheel is going to be sliding on. Keep in mind that once the reformers flipped back upside up, these wheels will be off these casters anyway. The friction between the wheel and the caster is very minimal because gravity is actually going to pull them the other way. So we don't really need to lubricate that as much as you may think. Putting the screws back onto the wheels. The information of the wheel will always face up. Basically, if you were to look under the reformer and look at the side wheels, you want to see the size of the wheel, the information of who made it, and anything in case you wanted to replace your wheel. To put the screw back into the wheel, we're going to spin the screw. Although it's not threaded, we want to spin the screw to assure that the grease spreads evenly in the inner side of the wheel, as well as around the axle screw. Just shoving the screw in there will cause all the grease to come out. If you need to reverse the screw, that's completely fine. Just reverse it as you spin it clockwise in the same direction and go back in as you spin it. This will decrease the amount of grease that comes off at the end and increase the amount of grease you actually got in the shaft and around the axle screw where you need it. Once the screw is in the wheel, what I do is I completely put it back on the caster right away, and I hand tighten it. So I know that all I have to do is go back with my Allen key at the end and tighten that wheel. And I'll repeat the same process for the rest of the wheels. Spin the screw on its way in, take my time with this part. Otherwise, it defeats the time we took to do this whole service. Make sure the washers aren't taking off your grease, that you're evenly trying to spread it as you slide the screw in. And just put the wheel back on the caster. I'm going ahead and put the other 2 screws on the other 2 wheels. And then we're ready to tighten the side wheels. When threading the screw into the wheel, although the wheel is not threaded, we're going to spin the screw into the wheel. For this part, I like to hold my wheel sideways as well as the screw, spin it on its side. This gives me more control as to how far I'm pushing that screw into the wheel versus if the wheel were upside up and the screw just falls in, it'll remove all the grease because gravity will pull the screw in. So on its side is the best method to put the side wheel screw back into the side wheel. And we'll just put it into a caster, hand tighten it. There will be a lot of excess grease on the head of the screw and on the washers, which you will clean at the end of the whole service. Once all the wheels are back on their casters, you can now grab the Allen key that you used to remove them, number 4. And we're just going to tighten them back to their tightest point. Unlike the main wheels, you want to tighten these screws all the way. You will not hear a click on your way back in, but you will feel when they have hit their limit. So you want to tighten them to the point where the screw doesn't tighten anymore, but you also don't want to break your tool doing this or push to the point where it just doesn't feel normal. You will feel the end of the thread hit the end of the screw and it locks on its own. If you want to get some practice as to how tight that is, just remove it, you'll hear the click, and then just tighten it again. You can remove it again to hear the click. So you know that both times you did tighten it properly. Chances are the third time is also tight enough, and you can just remove the axle screw, the Allen key. It'll be nice and snug. You won't hear a click, but you will feel that it's nice and tight. Once you've tightened all the wheels, you put your Allen key down, and you're ready to clean the excess part of all the wheels. You can use some of the same paper towel that you've been using just to clean the excess grease. And how do you know if the wheels were serviced properly? We're going to give them a spin, and they should again spin in silence because the lubrication between the wheel and the axle screw is completely lubricated. There should be no sound in between the axle screw and the wheel. Now you can go ahead and remove all of your tools and materials from the carriage of the frame, put away your lithium grease and everything you may have used, and you are ready to turn the carriage back over.